This car has somehow traveled over 1,000,000 miles without ever stopping and without refueling even once. Even more unbelievable, this mountain road seems to have no end. At first, the four young travelers don't notice anything strange. To them, this is just a normal graduation trip. But everything changes when they drive into a dark and eerie forest. Behind the wheel, Tyler suddenly realizes he might have missed a turn. Even though the navigation still tells him to keep going straight, he doesn't hesitate. He slams on the brakes and turns the car around. Tyler tries to head back to the previous fork in the road. But to everyone's horror, there's suddenly no road ahead at all. Tyler's face turns pale. Just moments ago, the road was completely clear, so how did it become a dead end after turning around? The two passengers in the back seat can't believe it either. They start wondering if Tyler accidentally took the wrong branch. But Tyler is an experienced driver. There's no way he'd make such a basic mistake. Confused and uneasy, he steps out of the car and walks toward a pile of grass ahead to take a closer look. From what he can see, it doesn't look like it was recently placed there. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound comes from up ahead. At the same time, James, who had stepped out for some fresh air, also notices something moving in the distance. Using the car's headlights to look closer, they spot what appears to be a vague human figure crouching in the grass. The next moment, a mob of people comes charging toward them, screaming like madmen. They try to force their way into the car, while the two inside slam against the doors to keep them out. James freezes, completely stunned and unsure what to do. Tyler runs over and shouts a warning. These crazed figures aren't actually after them. The two of them shout toward their friends in the car, and then immediately take off, running forward. Day quickly understands and jumps into the driver's seat, slamming her foot on the gas. The car roars to life, plowing a path through the chaos. James and Tyler, who had been waiting ahead, jump in as soon as they can. Day floors it, pushing the car to full power, finally shaking off these mysterious attackers. Even so, everyone in the car feels a lingering unease. The mountain road stretches straight ahead, and there's no telling how far they still have to go to get out. To make matters worse, the fuel tank is only a quarter full. Day pulls over to catch their breath and figure out a plan. But it isn't long before more people appear along the sides of the road, rushing toward them again. Day has no choice but to start the car and take off once more. After encountering so many strange events in a row, a cold shiver runs down their spines. They try to call for help, but there's absolutely no signal in this place. As dawn slowly breaks, the group realizes something even more terrifying. After driving all night, the fuel gauge still reads a quarter tank. Day wonders if the fuel gauge is broken, but James cautiously warns her not to turn the car off. They pull the car over to the side of the road, and Tyler gets out to check under the hood, while Day and the others step out for some fresh air. But within minutes, that strange crowd comes charging at them again. Everyone scrambles back into the car, hearts racing. Tyler grips the wheel and grumbles, asking where these people could possibly be coming from. The atmosphere in the car grows heavier and more suffocating, and some of them start imagining all sorts of impossible scenarios. James looks pale and wonders if they're actually dead, because otherwise, how could such surreal, nightmarish events be happening? Yet despite their fear, a small part of them still clings to hope. As long as they can escape this cursed mountain road, they might finally return to normal life. But reality quickly slaps them in the face. They drive through an entire day, yet the car still winds through the forest as if the road has no end. And the strangest part is yet to come. From the moment they realize they were lost yesterday, a full 24 hours have passed. They haven't eaten, but they don't feel hungry, and even sleepiness hasn't touched them at all. The group feels like their bodies have frozen in time, just like the fuel in the car that never seems to run out. Faced with all these unexplainable phenomena, some think it's just a dream, while others whisper about a collective hallucination. James speaks with exhaustion, wondering if they're trapped in some kind of purgatory, a place where one must confess sins or face judgment. Tyler, behind the wheel, tries to calm everyone down, telling them not to overthink, because none of them truly knows if they're alive or dead. For now, the most important thing is to figure out what's really going on. Suddenly, Tyler stops the car. Everyone scans the surroundings cautiously, while Day pulls out her phone to start timing. About a minute and a half later, the mad crowd appears again. By noticing this pattern, they realize they might be able to explore more safely. Finally, as daylight breaks, Tyler jumps out of the car and dashes into the woods, hoping to spot a hidden path out. But all he sees are figures curled up in the grass, shadows of people, or something else entirely. Then a warning horn blares from behind. Their 1.5-minute window has expired. Tyler sprints back to the car, heart pounding, and jumps inside. After restarting the car, Tyler can't help but complain about the short intervals. He can barely get 100 yards before the crowd catches up again. Day, bored, fiddles with the radio, but every channel is dead silent. She then turns to organizing supplies in the car. Among the small items, flashlights, lighters, she even finds a chocolate bar. But strangely, none of them feel hungry, and James warns everyone not to eat it, joking that given their current state, they might be digesting it for a lifetime. Before they realize it, 3 days have passed. The group has been curled up in the car, only venturing out briefly for their 1.5-minute windows. Tyler occasionally ventures deeper into the woods to scout, but finds nothing. His mind teeters on the edge of collapse, and he decides to take a final risky move to chase someone from the crowd and interrogate them. But as the seconds tick by, the person just shouts and rants, providing no useful information at all. Seeing this, James grabs Tyler and drags him back into the car. Another failed attempt leaves the group suffocating under the oppressive atmosphere inside the vehicle. Then out of nowhere, they spot an old, abandoned car parked by the roadside. Tyler cautiously holds back, suspecting it might be a trap. But James, desperate for answers, ignores their warnings and runs straight toward it. But when they approach the car, it was completely empty. Even more unsettling, the odometer read 990,000 miles. James felt his heart plummet into his chest. It was clear the car's owner had been trapped on this road, just like them. Eventually, realizing there was no way out, the owner had simply given up. The atmosphere inside the car grew heavier with silence. No more silly jokes, no more attempts to figure out an escape. Were they doomed to repeat the same fate? Tyler silently floored the gas pedal, trying to break free from this endless stretch. But after the group persuaded him, he finally slowed down. Then he stepped out alone, staring at the infinite road ahead. They had already driven 60,000 miles. Tyler's eyes had lost all spark. After exploring once more, he refused to leave. He'd had enough of this iron box-like trap, and all he hoped was that James would find the end and come back to tell him. When Day noticed only James by the roadside, she jumped out of the car and shouted Tyler's name desperately. But the crazed crowd was closing in, and the group had no choice but to drive away, leaving Tyler alone, lost in sorrow. Their 4-person team was now down to 3, and the weight of grief hung over them. The journey ahead was tedious and hopeless, and they were forced to find ways to pass the time. James suddenly realized something terrifying. The longer they stayed trapped in this nightmare, the more numb their emotions became. He hadn't felt real hope or despair in what felt like forever. Hearing this, Day thought it made sense, so she hurriedly dragged the others out of the car. No matter what, the pent-up emotions had to be released. But despite Day and Fisher screaming their lungs out, James just stared blankly, expressionless. It was impossible to tell whether he was completely hopeless or just thought their outburst was childish. After venting, Day and Fisher seemed to recover some energy, but as time dragged on, the effect of these cathartic screams began to fade. James's voice turned low and hoarse as he asked how long they could keep going. The only answer was deathly silence. That day, they encountered another car by the roadside, and the owner lay motionless in the nearby grass. When James questioned him, the man just moved his head slightly, his eyes filled with despair. When time ran out, the group quickly got back in the car. James didn't speak. He just gripped the wheel tightly, his gaze hollow. It seemed their fate might end up just like that man's. This journey, this endless road, was destined to be a loop with no escape. They had obviously realized the same thing. She suggested maybe it was time to stop driving. After all, pushing forward held no meaning, and all it did was trap them in endless torment. James, though feeling the weight of despair, still believed it wasn't time to give up. In his mind, every road must eventually come to an end. They didn't argue anymore, but the spark in her eyes faded further. Fisher, sitting beside her, didn't even bother to blink, completely resigned. For the next 3 days, James drove alone, while Day and Fisher sat like elderly souls awaiting death. That evening, as usual, the 3 of them got out of the car for some fresh air. Fisher spoke up, suggesting maybe they should just give up together. Seeing James still determined to drive a little further, Day pulled out the car keys. thinking there was no need for him to torment himself. But James ignored the gesture, snatching the keys back. Since Day and Fisher wanted to give up, he saw no reason to stop them. He restarted the car, took one last glance at his friends, and then set off alone on his endless journey, embracing the adventure that now belonged solely to him. This time, there was finally a change. Dark, heavy clouds opened up, and a sudden downpour began. James was ecstatic. After being trapped here for 2.5 years, he had never seen weather like this. He firmly believed the exit was just ahead. After who knows how many days and nights, James witnessed an incredible scene. Up ahead, in a clearing, there was a pile of abandoned vehicles, and on the side of the road, a single signpost stood. Could this finally be the end of the road? But the exit he had been hoping for did not appear. This time, James completely broke down. He slumped beside his car and pulled out the energy bar he had been too afraid to eat. As he ate, tears streamed down his face. Nearly 3 years of relentless perseverance had led to this utterly despairing result. His heart was filled with raw frustration, and the first scream he let out became a funeral dirge for the life he had endured. In the end, James turned the car around and drove back the way he had come. But this time, there was no glimmer of hope left in his eyes. And that wraps up, it ends. This low-budget film may have a simple story, but the underlying metaphors are quite thought-provoking. In the real world, most people are trapped in a never-ending cycle. Whether it's at work or at home, we keep repeating the same routines every day. Even the slightest pause can make the pressure feel suffocating. But if you take a moment to really think and ask yourself what truly matters in life, you'll realize that most of the stress we feel is self-imposed. Only by relaxing your mind can you face your finite, yet beautiful life with a positive outlook. That's it for today's recap. If you enjoyed it, make sure to stay tuned for the next one. See you next time.